that is the true secret to success because it's going to help you level up in all areas. I am Crystal Conkle. I am CMO at the 20 MSP. This is an investment. It's not an expense. I think that's the biggest problem for a lot of MSPs. They all have that $10 million dream, but their marketing budget says otherwise. I think that if you want to grow, you have to be memorable. And so many MSPs hide behind just technical buzzwords and jargon.
Should an MSP think about carving out for marketing?
I hate this question. From my perspective, I would say minimum. Our strategy is focused on authenticity. We don't market like a faceless corporate entity. We engage with people in a way that's real, that's relevant. Not marketing is like throwing a party but forgetting to send the invitations. They give it a timeline like that and they think, okay, I spent this amount of money and this timeline, I should get this at the end of it. Such a horrible way to look at it because there's so many different components. Marketing is the fuel for your business. You will not get where you want to go without it.
Crystal, welcome to the MSP Insider Show. Please tell the audience who you are, what you do, and why the hell that you do it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Excited to be here. I am Crystal Conkle. I am CMO at the 20 MSP, and I oversee all of our marketing efforts. So digital marketing, public relations, branding, demand gen, all of the marketing stuff.
Yeah, so just a couple of things.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a really awesome team.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And tons of things that I'm excited to actually spend some time on because so much of that list I feel like is really foreign to a lot of MSPs, like when you get down to it. And yet it's so fundamentally critical to growth and to the success of what we do in the market that we do it. So for the audience, we are going to rip off the lid and dive really deep and really kind of challenge some of the beliefs around that long list of things that she's responsible for. And I'm looking forward to that. Before we dive in though, Crystal, what we do on the show is every guest leaves behind a question that we open the show with for the next guest. And so the question that you get to open with comes from Jeff Lair at Start Grow Manage. And the question that he had was, how is the MSP market evolving and how do MSPs prepare for that?
Oh, I love that. Great question. I think it's evolving in a number of ways. I mean, you can look at it from an M&A consolidation standpoint. I think we're seeing so much M&A, not just here at the 20, but throughout the industry, whether that's private equity or just MSPs who are merging together. It's getting harder and harder to compete. I think this is a natural intro into our conversation today because, how do you compete? That's marketing. But so I think that's a big one. I think cybersecurity, I know a lot of people will say, oh, cybersecurity, we've been saying that for years and years. But I think we're finally at a point where end clients understand the importance of it and how it impacts their business. And so they're open and receptive to those conversations and they really see the need for having a managed IT service provider.
Yeah, it's like the shift has finally happened where it's a conversation that MSPs always tried to have, yet now it's a conversation the customer is willing to have, right? Or in some cases even leading or leaning into.
Right. I mean, they're seeing it in the headlines every day and they're understanding it's not just these big corporations. It's something that can impact, their business. They have to be ready and prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to set that context, the work that you've done at the 20, really building and leading that marketing machine has what I would say considered reshaped how a high growth MSP really needs to position themselves, especially in a saturated market like the one that we're in. And so we'll really start to deconstruct really like the recipe, that the things that must go into that to really unlock growth, which is such a Achilles heel for most of the MSPs in our space, right? Like everyone wants it. It tends to be one of the top level first responses or answers. If you survey any group of MSPs in a room, is like, where's your biggest challenge? It's growth. It's I need more leads, or it's I need more sales. And yet there's so much, I usually call it like the really deep thinking work that has to go into it before you can flip on or move to the really deep doing work or the execution work.
100%. I think great marketing looks really easy, but there is so much that goes into that strategy.
Yeah. And it's almost like something I didn't know until 9 months ago is like building product. And it's the same kind of concept. Like the more simple the interaction or the user interface or the usage of the tool is, it's almost like the more complex behind the scenes it is to get it to interact that way. So to start things off, really where I thought we could begin is a little bit more through the origin story, lens. And so I want you to tell me about the moment that you realized most MSPs kind of completely misunderstood what marketing actually is.
Um, I would say honestly, the moment I first realized that is when I first went to work for Tim. I think it was 13 years ago. It
Hmm.
was his first marketing hire. He was an MSP wanting to grow,
Yeah.
understood that he needed to market. He'd been to industry events, they're pushing it, um, but just really didn't get it.
Hmm.
And so, learned that there back, that was before it was the 20 MSP, it was Roland Technology Group.
Hmm.
And then interacting with MSPs
Yeah.
after the 20 was established, we brought them together. Um, just having those conversations, I mean, you realize like how big of an issue it actually is. They all want to grow,
Hmm.
um, but they don't know how to get there, and none of them have that marketing background.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's actually an important detail that shouldn't get lost. Is like the marketing background, which is arguably a whole different atmosphere of the brain. Like it's not even just a different hemisphere of the brain than most traditional MSP owners, but like the the what you have to think about, the why you have to think about it, the way you need to break down a message or an idea in order to articulate it in a way that's transferable, I think is one of those pieces of the cavern that makes it so unapproachable to the highly analytical, like highly uh, logical and transactional mind, which again most of us MSP owners have. How did the realization over those last 13 years even really change who or how you had to become as a marketing leader inside such a traditionally technically focused industry?
That's a great question. It was easier within the 20, I think, because Tim really understands the importance of marketing and is
Mm-hmm.
willing to invest in it. And he quickly understood, okay, this is an investment. It's not an expense. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
biggest problem for a lot of MSPs
Yep.
is they view it as an expense. They think it's transactional. They think, okay, I pay XYZ, I'm going to get XYZ, I'm going to get this many leads.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't work like that. They all have that $10 million dream.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
but their marketing budget says otherwise. They just don't budget for it, and they don't see the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so going back to your question about evolving that within the group, I mean, the three pillars when we established the 20 were lead gen, sales, and scale, not because we provide lead gen, and we've changed our messaging a lot so
Mm-hmm.
that that is clear. But those are the three pillars that an MSP needs to succeed. And so lead gen, I mean, they've got to, as Tim says, make their phone ring,
Yeah.
figure out how to do that, whether that's hiring someone, outsourcing it. And it's really, I mean, a lot of it honestly is mindset, getting them to understand that and being willing to invest in that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that so many MSP owners overlook marketing as a strategy.
Yeah.
Operations, yes, like their stack, yes, that's all solid, but their brand is nowhere to be found, and it's not something that they really think about.
Mm.
um, I think so many MSPs hide a really great business behind a weak brand.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you're not a secret, and
Mm-hmm.
so why act like that you're a business? Start acting like a business.
Yeah, that's such a powerful statement, truly. And I think you're right because there's an element, or not, I think you're right. I know that you're right after dealing with so many of them myself, but there's that, it's almost like not knowing what to say and not
Yes.
knowing who to say it to. And so it's that
Yes.
fundamental breakdown of
Right.
articulating what you're there for and why, right? In such a way that someone else would want to be leaning into that out of curiosity or like genuine intent. And again, it kind of goes back maybe again to the characteristics or the archetypes, but like what would you then say is the hardest part about breaking MSPs out of their engineering first identity and into seeing marketing more as a lever and not a liability, to your point?
I mean, that's the impossible challenge.
Mm,
It is so hard, and I feel like we've made a lot of progress in this industry, but it's
yeah.
still such an issue, and they just don't understand it. I mean, they're just not marketing, and I always say, not marketing is like throwing a party but forgetting to send the
Mm,
invitations.
yeah.
And I mean, they just have to understand, I want to grow, and this is the only way that I'm going to get there. So many of
Mhm.
them rely on referrals, and that'll get you to a certain point, and then you're going to
Right.
plateau, and then what?
Yeah. How about this was always an internal heated question when I was running growth for some MSPs, but like, have you seen, maybe it's an industry baseline or maybe it's a crystal baseline of like what uh percentage, maybe it's percentage of revenue, maybe it's percentage of the budget, should an MSP think about carving out specifically for marketing to invest in growth?
They hate this question.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I would say minimum 10%.
Okay.
And that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very, they view marketing as a luxury.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, but you invest the money, you're going to grow.
Yeah. And the thing that I also experienced, I felt like, because I went from, well, I worked for five different MSPs, seven different times over 18 years, but two of those uh, times was running growth for different MSPs. And so one entering where like they didn't even have a GL account for marketing, right? Because it was a
Right.
traditional MSP that just had done the founder led sales and that kind of thing. And so to get to the point where I was in conversations where it was like setting a budget number, and I'm with you. I pushed for 10 or above if I could get there, but usually that came after the results were demonstrated. Because also to the point that's beneath your point, which is it was an investment and the results were there. And so what we were able to do systematically is change marketing and sales. I used to call it from a slot machine to a vending machine, right?
Oh, I like that.
We knew the dollars that we put in would eventually drop a bag of Skittles, right? And we knew how much it was going to cost rather than we were just sitting there pulling on it. But I think the industry by and large and a lot of the marketing solutions that are out there is it like it places the slot machine in front of the MSP and then just asks it to keep on feeding the beast
Oh, exactly.
indefinitely. Yeah, the
And I think that's a hard thing too with this industry is there are a lot of those vendors out there like that, and they promise those magic results and quick fixes, but marketing
mhm,
truly is a long game. And I
yeah,
think that a lot of MSPs get burned that way.
yeah,
And then that's why they're hesitant to invest in marketing again.
yeah. And let's stick there for a second because I do agree, and I don't know, brushed up against it a couple times when I was trying to figure it out too. On one of the MSPs, I had an internal marketing team, and then another one I had different versions of outsourced teams. As an MSP who knows nothing about like the dark magic that happens inside the marketing black box, and I but I am committing the dollars to it, right? So like the budget piece is taken care of. Can you think of like the number one or the top three things I should be paying attention to or becoming involved in to ensure that the megaphone of marketing, I don't want to use the word is successful, but is like, what's the right way of saying it? Marketing, I think, is one area where MSP owners abdicate responsibility really quickly as soon as they sort of make the decision. So I'm trying to tie the connection between really leaning in and owning how marketing comes alive for their MSP to drive the results that they're looking for.
So you're talking about three channels
Yeah,
in
either
terms
three
of marketing
channels or like the first three things
that
they
you would
should.
do.
Yeah, exactly.
Number one, I mean, I hate to even say this because I mean, it seems like a given, but surely they have a CRM.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
so important to build your list, because you own that.
Mm.
All of the platforms that you're using, like social media, you don't own that. And so when you can build your own list that you own, I think that becomes increasingly valuable.
Yeah.
And so build a list that you can drip to and that you can tap into and reach out
Hmm.
for marketing. Obviously, website is huge,
Hmm.
and social. So I would say if I had to narrow it down to like the three most important, it would be those.
Yeah. I'm actually glad that you started with CRM too, because I mean, we both can laugh knowing that it's like paramount to the marketing actions and
Right.
the intentions. But you are right in that one, you need to own your audience, and two, you need a central place to keep them, and then three, like the list becomes the message. Um, and
Right. It's mind-boggling to me how many MSPs are still using like a spreadsheet or
mhm.
something like that.
Yeah, or their
Even
inbox.
some, right? Even some that
Yeah.
have really grown. I mean, I look at MSPs that we've acquired
Hmm.
and they send over their list. I mean, it's unreal
Yeah.
what we're working with.
Yeah, and there's so many approachable options in today's market as well, where having nothing really isn't an excuse anymore.
Exactly.
Uh,
There are some great options now, and they're,
yeah,
cheap and easy
Hmm.
to use, and there's no reason not to.
Yeah, and I think sometimes maybe it goes back to like the issue between the thinking and the doing work a little bit is we tend to overthink and over engineer how challenging it really is to like even set up, use, manage, or retain a CRM. Not that it can't be a lot of work, but we allow the like, I think Jesse Miller always calls it professor perfection, right? The concept of
Right.
perfection around it is like the inhibitor that actually keeps you from starting. Um,
Yes. You know, with so much of marketing, I
mm,
think that so many MSPs think that marketing has to be perfect
yeah.
and they will overthink it to death and then never, get it off the ground.
Hmm. Yeah. And so now we have like multiple dichotomies presenting itself, right? We have the MSPs who've never invested in it at all and really want the growth. And then maybe on the other side of that is the ones that have chosen to invest, but perhaps didn't get the results they were looking for. Or
Right.
this was something else I ran into, didn't actually understand how to measure the timeline to attribute the results appropriately, right? I think one
Right.
fallacy, and maybe you can help offer some experienced clarity to it. But one fallacy I ran into often was the measurement of success was often overlaid over the exact same time interval that the dollars went out, meaning the budget for the year, right? Let's just go 2025. The budget dollars being spent for 2025 being like directly expected to contribute the whatever the ridiculous return was, like 12x return on the thing. But the measurement of the results have to come over a completely different timeline. And meaning like the results of the investment today in an average sales cycle of 90 days at best, right? And then you just
Right.
kind of like start skewing these timelines to where it takes you at least 6 months to ramp up. And so you've already shifted all of the time by like 6 to 9 months where you're going to measure those results. Have you seen where MSP owners get emotionally attached to the outcome and they're measuring it through that skewed lens? And so then they pull the plug too soon?
Oh, 100%. I think you're exactly right. Where, they give it a timeline like that and they think, okay, I spent this amount of money and this timeline, I should get this at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, it's such a horrible way to look at it because there's
Yeah.
so many different components. I don't even know where to go first with this.
Yeah.
I mean, number one, every marketing channel or method is going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
There, so much of it is playing the long game when you're building a brand. But not
Mm-hmm.
only that, when you get inbound leads, like pay per click is great because those are, prospects who are at their moment of need.
Yeah.
So they're searching, they're reaching out because they need an MSP, they're unhappy with theirs.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, it's going to be a shorter sales cycle
Mm-hmm.
versus that outbound. You may have a great prospect, but they're in a contract for another 18 months.
Right.
And so I think there are a number of different factors that go into it. I think that over time, when you've been consistently marketing for years, you can get really good numbers, KPIs, like
Mm-hmm.
figuring out at the base level, like your RAC, your revenue acquisition costs, customer acquisition costs,
Mm-hmm.
those things.
Mm-hmm.
But to try to put an exact timeline on your marketing on each piece of it, I mean, you're never going to get there. There's so many factors that go
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah. Especially kind of going back to your point about like if you don't have a CRM or anywhere to even attempt to maintain attribution, um, or measurement or classification or segmentation, like any of the things that you would be leveraging those tools for, you sort of do end up in that binary measurement system, which is where I found the core conflict to be is like the success or failure of marketing was being looked at through a 12-month lens on a P&L. And like, that's just
Right,
not where the data reflects reality.
right.
And then if they were emotionally connected to the outcome, it's like, well, I put all this money in, I haven't gotten anything out. And then you stop and then you start again 3 months later. It's just like the herky jerkiness of the reaction of,
Right. And when you talk about attribution, that's another subject I get really heated about. I think that, the same way that they want to be able to measure marketing, they want to measure or track attribution. I think
mm,
there's so many factors with like multi-touch attribution. I
yeah.
mean, say someone first heard you on a podcast,
Hmm.
you set brand awareness, then they go check out your website, then maybe
Yeah.
months later they reach out. And so, I mean, where do you attribute that? I mean, I think a lot of people get focused on attribution so that okay, this works, we're going to spend more on this, but there are a
Yeah.
lot of other things in play there.
Yeah, exactly. From your perspective, which I do believe is unique through this lens of talking about MSP marketing, because we're ultimately talking about uh, the scale, right? You've built a national MSP brand, and not just through tools and not just through tickets and all the other kind of like micro level stuff, but through clear messaging, differentiated positioning, and like a strategic marketing integration between kind of all the channels that we were talking about. What would you say is the core system or framework that allows the 20 to scale while most MSPs truly still stay stuck in that like weird different delusion?
I think, a few different angles there. I think number one is, just our strategy is focused on authenticity.
Mm,
I think that we don't market like a faceless corporate entity. And
hmm.
so we engage with people in a way that's real, that's relevant, that's engaging. And I think that that balance of strength and approachability
Hmm.
has been so important for the 20.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question or if I kind
Yeah.
of went a different route, but for us. And then as for carrying out that strategy, I think just having really good systems in place.
Mm,
Just like everything else in the business has to be scalable, your marketing has to be scalable as well, especially with acquisitions. We are closing on our 39th acquisition this week.
yeah.
And so, as we tap into more and more markets across the
Hmm.
country, the marketing has to be scalable, repeatable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. If I did a word cloud now on part of the episode, from what I'm hearing from you, is strategy is a word that is getting bigger and bigger on the word
Yes.
cloud, which is good. It's also something that I don't oftentimes hear pinned and pegged straight, like being synonymous with marketing. When you think about strategy, specifically marketing strategy, and now we're talking to those MSPs who, like, again, they know they want to market, maybe they're doing some sort of marketing, they don't really know how to tie it to their success or failure, which is fine, but they're committed to it, which is the most important part. So like they're committed to not stopping marketing. Where do they begin to really even step back and think about marketing as a strategy for the business to align to the investment in it? Like, where do you begin when it comes to strategy?
I think figuring out like number one, like your differentiators. I
Mm,
think that figuring out how they're different and incorporating that into their strategy. You hear so much of the same in this industry.
yeah.
All MSPs sound
Right.
alike.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's just how it is. You could,
Hmm.
interchange logos on websites, and it sounds exactly the same. So I think they all sound like their competitors.
Hmm.
Um, I think that marketing language is really tired. They're all using proactive, 24/7 world class service.
Yeah.
And I think that great service isn't a differentiator, it's a given.
Hmm.
And so figuring out, how you're different is going to be core so that you can determine that messaging going forward and build a strategy from that.
Yeah.
Um, I think that if you want to grow, you have to be memorable.
Mm,
And so many MSPs hide behind just technical buzzwords and jargon.
yeah.
Um, and their websites and their marketing sounds like a vendor data sheet. It doesn't
Mm,
sound like them. And so I think that is so, I could go on all day about this,
yeah.
but it's so incredibly important.
Yeah, I think you're onto something that really is truly important, and also something that I don't think gets enough attention or enough visibility, especially to that MSP owner. Because again, we talked about at the beginning, like it does, it's a different way of thinking, and it's a different brain that can really latch onto, unpack, and sort of repackage and articulate in such a way that'll resonate to the market versus like how the MSP owner will talk. And I also think, you know, in large part, like it's not the MSP owner's fault necessarily, because I think the best practices have created things the way they are. Most of the vendors have created things to be the way
Yes.
they are, and then the MSP owner doesn't know how to do it any different, and so they end up being stuck in that reality where, like, why do you think so many MSPs believe that they're unique? I'm throwing up some air quotes, but they, to your point, really still sound like just a clone of everyone else's website or everyone else's pitch.
Mhm. I think you hit the nail on the head. They don't know any better. And I think that vendors are creating these cookie cutter solutions,
Hmm.
and it uses all that same language. And
Yeah,
so I don't think that they really understand or know how to own their strengths and, own their voice and lead with that.
yeah. Is there any um, crystal best practice for, like, even if it's an initial exercise of finding that voice or uncovering, their uniqueness, their truth, their story, their personality, to your point earlier about not just showing up as another corporate slick, but like, how do I dig into myself as the MSP owner that can't maybe do the introspection to get to those words? Is there an exercise, a framework, or a series of things that you found to be successful with when working with these kinds of personality types?
Great question. I like that. I would say number one, start with clarity. What do you
Mm,
actually do best? Who do you serve best? What do your clients say about you? Number two, again, stop trying to sound like every other MSP.
yeah.
Kill the jargon, kill that generic tech speak, speak like a human.
Hmm.
um, Clients don't want to hear about innovative, best in class synergies, that
Yeah.
language. They want to know, I mean, it's always about what's in it for me. How can you help them? How can you help them,
Hmm.
with what how can you help them solve their problems?
Yeah.
I think next I would say use your own voice,
Mm,
literally. Brand is more than just colors and logos, and, it's
yeah.
how you sound.
Hmm.
And so weaving that into your messaging from the beginning is critical.
Hmm.
Um, so many MSPs think I just need to be louder, and they're saying the same things that other people are. They're just saying it louder, and that's not going to help you accomplish your goals either. Um, as I mentioned before, I think client feedback is huge.
Yeah.
Use that. Ask your best clients what made you say yes, and build
Hmm.
messaging around that, not just what you think people want to hear.
Yeah. No, that's so huge, and I'm glad that you refocused on something that they can't argue or complain about or throw an objection at either. Which is like, if you really truly stop and go back to your current clients and start to go figure out by asking them or having conversations with them or going back and looking in the documented history with them, like, why
Your
did they choose
CRM.
to work with you, right? Like,
Right.
and finding their actual words, to your other point, I think is so huge. Where um, that was one of the first discoveries I made when building the sales system that we ran, was discovering the fact that the most important process that was happening during a sales cycle had nothing to do with anything I could control as the MSP, and everything to do with the buyer's buying process. Like,
Right.
I never even was aware that a buying process was occurring, even though, take my MSP hat off, like, I'm a buyer of all sorts of other things at any given moment, and I have my own inherent, process, so to speak. And so I think, one, hopefully just the awareness of a buying process and a buying journey can be an unlock for some MSPs. And you had mentioned that earlier when we were talking about the different channels, right? Like a pay per click or a traffic driven, they're going to come in at a different level of awareness and a different level of need, which is why it seems like, man, why can't they all be that easy?
Right. That's another issue too, veering off a little bit here. I
Hmm.
think that, you know, MSPs think that it should all be that easy and they should all work like that. And then also, okay, if this is working and I pay this much and I get this many amount leads, why can't I just dial it up and I'll get
Mm,
more?
yeah.
It's dependent upon so many things,
Yeah.
traffic, volume, demand.
Right. And then if you throw in a little bit of accountability and execution into that too, you can go back and look at, well, it's really just like consistent action over time,
Yes.
but doing the right things too, to your point of, the right actions, the right inputs, the right activities. And if we put some marketing language on that, going back to it, in my experience, the most powerful thing in marketing, which in some cases does take the most deep thinking work to get right, it also takes a ton of testing, was the messaging. Like, nailing your messaging is so much more important than kind of everything else that comes after it, whether that be paid media, right? If I'm going to run ads, or I'm going to do outbound email, or I'm going to take out a radio, like, it doesn't, none of that stuff mattered if you weren't saying the right thing to the right
Right.
people. Um, have you ever found, again, maybe it's like a crystal ball, but like an exercise to unearth, unpack, or extract specifically like the messaging pieces that can be helpful or tangible to an MSP as they're looking to change, whether it's their website or their copy or anything, really just the messaging that goes through everything?
I think there are a number of different methods over the years. I've gone through different exercises, whether it was, through trainings at events,
Hmm.
conferences, did story brand, got certified
Yeah.
in that. But I think it all really boils down to understanding your audience,
Hmm.
understanding their pain points, and building, your messaging from that, figuring out, like I said, how you're different.
Yeah.
And it's really, really simple when you dial it down.
Yeah. What's interesting, and I'm glad you brought it up too, is when you mentioned just pivoting the messaging to be about the prospect and their problems, right? And then if you put that in the context of everything we've already said, which is this industry is saturated with a bunch of people saying the exact same thing in a different color,
Right.
most of them are not talking about the things that matter to prospects, which is also why you're frustrated and not growing as an MSP. And so what I've had discovered along the way, and I forget which, you know, guru, so to speak, that I had even heard it, but they had said that if you can articulate someone's problem more clearly than they can, then they automatically and subconsciously associate you with the solution. And so I like latched onto that concept, and we started repositioning all of our messaging around, well, what are their problems? So if you break that down to a dental office as an example, it's like they don't care about the backups, they don't care about the network, they don't care about anything other than how do I keep the chairs full of patients, right? And what happens when I have a chair in the patient and I can't take an x-ray, like those kinds of things. And so shifting the messaging to specifically talking about the problems that they interact with or experience in their day-to-day, and then leaning way into either eliminating that, removing that, or understanding it is really like a huge unlock for driving conversation and engagement.
Absolutely. I would say that there, like what you just articulated, is true differentiation. So being
Mm,
clear, being confident, being specific, and that's the core.
yeah, that's huge. Um, the other part around that, which I always felt like I was really well suited for, fortunately, out of the evolution of my career progression, is I spent 10 years on the tech side before I moved into the sales and marketing side. And so messaging was just like built into my core. Like, what was the phone call that I got from all the people, right?
Right.
Was it a dental office? Well, this was the problem. Was it a not a dental office, but a lawyer? Well, okay, they're going to talk about how they can't access their matters and they have a court or case coming up or whatever. There's a litigation they're working on or a deposition. It's like just use their language was
Nice. And that
step
gives
number
you
one.
such an edge.
Mm-hmm.
With one of our acquisitions, I think it's the only so far, yes, the only marketing employee that I've gotten. That should tell you a lot. 39
Yeah.
acquisitions,
Right.
one marketing employee through all of them. And
Yeah.
he was in a technical role, but had gone to school for copywriting,
Mm.
and had always wanted to be a copywriter, and has brought so much to this team because of that background and that knowledge. And that's the thing that these MSP owners have. They have that, at their
Yeah.
disposal. They have that
Mm-hmm.
understanding. But it's really been a secret weapon in our marketing.
Yeah. And that that is pretty telling actually, like that stat alone, right? 1 person out of 39, and I'm sure those other 39 didn't even have like contracts that, stayed through as far as marketing
No.
agreements and consulting and stuff. So it's huge that that number was that way. I wonder what the industry number would be. I'm sure the percentage would probably hold pretty accurate, but
Oh, I'm sure.
uh, if we look at again maybe like the middle of the road of the segment is like the MSPs who are still somewhat resistant to it, to marketing. So even in that context, when we have a proven system but the resistance is still real, especially in our industry where an industry that kind of rewards predictability over
Hmm.
like provoking something else. What do you think the biggest pushback, or let me ask a different question. What is the biggest pushback that you hear from all the MSPs that you get to touch when you tell them that their current marketing mindset is the thing that's really costing them their growth?
I think at the base level, they understand that,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't want to invest the money.
Mm,
I mean, honestly, it means either outsourcing or hiring.
yeah.
It's that hard pill that they don't want to swallow.
Hmm. Yeah. And then, th-
Or, they want to, multi-purpose an employee. Like maybe they have an
yeah.
admin or
Right.
someone they think,
Hmm.
oh, well, he or she can
Yeah.
do marketing, as they get time.
Yeah. I think to lean into that, because I've seen and experienced that too, is uh, the evolution of like roles, responsibilities, and the wearing of multiple hats. But really, what we're ultimately talking about is committing to making your marketing far more relational than it is transactional in that situation where it's like, oh yeah, I have a marketing person for that, or really it's like the bookkeeper is the one that just like schedules the content calendar or
Right.
something. It's like, but marketing's so much more than just like a collection of tasks to do. um, in fact, maybe you're even better off not pushing schedule on some of that stuff, depending on what the message is that you're trying to portray. Because when I tried to boil it down to the essence of the job to be done as it related to marketing, it was kind of twofold. Marketing was to control other people's perceptions, and then the sales side was to transfer conviction. And like between those
I
two
like that.
jobs and those two jobs that aligned well, um, I wonder what could we unpack, or what can you discover through that lens if you looked at marketing through that same lens of like managing, controlling, I don't know what the right word is, other people's perceptions about you and the identity that you're presenting. How
I love that lens, and that kind of just made me. I'm going to go a little bit different direction, then we'll circle back.
Sure, do it.
Um, I think that with AI, and I know you're a big
Mm,
fan of AI, there is really no excuse. And
mm-hmm.
it's, the more that you give it, the better it's going to be. And if
Right.
you can give inputs like that
Yeah.
into AI and then, that base level messaging that we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no excuse not to be marketing, and
Yeah.
it's really scalable. And I think that creates a situation where you can repurpose an employee and have them assist with
Mm-hmm.
it. But you've got to give it, I mean, it's garbage in, garbage out, and it's going to
Right.
get better and better as it knows you, understands your business, understands your voice, understands what makes you different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that like that lens is the perfect way to look at it.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I answered your question because I kind of got
Yeah.
sidetracked and I got really
No,
excited.
it's a good example of maybe really like this next thing that I identified, and I went through it too. So it's not like I'm immune or I'm like pontificating or preaching down to anyone. Like I've had to overcome all of these things that I'm like throwing stones at in the industry, which is why I throw them. But it's ultimately fear, right? So how do you
Yes,
help, or how can we help those founders, those technical founders, even get past their fear of standing out, especially when they might be confusing visibility for risk, because those are
I love
two big
that.
variables.
I think really understanding that playing it safe
Mm,
is the fastest way to get ignored. And
yeah.
so, in this sea of sameness that we've talked about in this industry, being bold
Hmm.
wins, creating that visibility. I think one thing we've done really well here at the 20 from the beginning is that leadership, visibility, and culture.
Hmm.
Engaging, being approachable. I think that that tone really trickles down to how your team operates.
Yeah.
um, so I think that back to your question, a lot of MSPs are afraid to share their personality and the
Hmm.
brand. They want attention, but they're afraid to be seen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
um,
and then we just get paralyzed in this gap of like, well, I've tried all these things. It's like, but it had nothing to do with you. And here's a thing that I thought of as you were describing that. There's two things I want to touch on. One, most MSPs start sort of the same way, right? But either way, you're growing by referral and word of mouth, and you're showing up in such a way that made you referable, right? And so there's an element of personality that you're bringing to those early relationships. And I wanted to kind of challenge the MSP that's listening, because they don't know where to find their voice. They don't know how to start over. They maybe agree with what we're saying, but again, they're sort of stuck. It's like one of the challenges I used to ask any MSP that I talk to is like, I wanted to figure out, have you forgotten where you came from or not? It's one of my like criteria to work with them, actually, is that they can't have forgotten that. And the reason is it kind of pulls back maybe to what you were saying. It's like you still have to show up in such a way that doesn't get lost in the sea of sameness. There was a principle, uh, thought that I learned from Russell Brunson. I don't know where it came from before then, but at any rate, it was in one of his books about the prolific index. And it's a really easy scale. I forget how many things are on it because it didn't really matter. But on the outside, you have polarizing, and then if you come just in one step from either side, depending on the position, then there's prolific, and then there's basically like same, and in the center is like boring. And his argument at the time was like, if you can't push your messaging out as far as to the prolific lane, then you'll never be memorable, which you had mentioned earlier. And and it's just dialed back just slightly to where it's not polarizing. It like has enough edge to be polarizing, but it still like rests in the prolific zone. I should pull that up and put it in the show notes or something, because that was one of the things I found also that helped rise above the noise in where we placed our messaging, was having an original enough idea, or at least using original enough words to convey something that
Right.
allowed someone to be like, I want that. And the point to close that off was like, you want your messaging to cause the person that's reading it or seeing it or hearing it to self-identify with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why personality is important. Personality is a magnet for the right
Mm-hmm.
people. The right clients and prospects are going to lean in when they see that. And if they're not the right ones, then they're going to keep scrolling, and you probably don't want them anyway.
Yeah.
Going back to something you hit on a minute ago, when you think about referrals and that plateau, think about why
Mm.
referrals work, because they're typically people that know you,
Yeah.
they understand what you do and how you help them, and they can articulate that to others.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you can build that into your own messaging, they're not going out to people saying, oh, you know what, they're very proactive, they're 24/7, they're this. They're talking about how you help them solve their own problems. And
Yeah.
that resonates with other people.
Right. And it goes back
Um,
to kind of one of the things you'd mentioned earlier, which we don't give anyone the scapegoat for. The out with is like, you have customers as an MSP, and odds are you have those 3 or 4 customers that you can do anything with, say anything with, be vulnerable with, like all those things. So like, if you don't know how to talk about yourself, or how to think about yourself, or how to view yourself, it would be a really good person to call, say, hey, I'm working with a company. Maybe you're not, but like, just frame the question so that they don't, so maybe it's less uncomfortable for the MSP to ask it. But I'm working with an outsourced marketing agency, and part of the things that we're doing is like really re-identifying the brand and like the image and the identity that we have here. What is it about MSP XYZ that brought you here, that keeps you here, and that, allows you to slam the phone on any competitor that calls you for my business, right? And for your business. And then again, listen to the words that they're saying.
right. Those are almost the exact questions that we ask in our testimonials,
Mm,
with clients and members, is what brought you here? What keeps you here? What problems do we solve for you?
yeah. Right. And to echo that, it's focusing on the problem messaging again, right?
Right.
One other person, and I don't remember again which guru it came from, but it worked for me when I started doing it, was um, that the that people will almost always agree on a problem, and they will almost always argue about the solution. And so if that is true, then marketing and messaging towards the problem is such an easier road to take to acceptance,
Right.
versus the other one where it's like the solution, it's all about you, and then that's a really easy road to take to increase resistance more than anything
Right. Oh,
else.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I was taught very early on in marketing that, when you're developing a new messaging or strategy,
Mm-hmm.
pretend that you're sitting across the table from your prospect,
Yeah.
and they're talking about, what are their problems, their issues, what keeps them up at night. Not only that, but where are they reading? Where are they getting information? And those are the places that you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other element that's true about what the example you just gave too is, when you think about, or when you put yourself in the situation where you're just having a one-to-one conversation across the table from each other, you use different language
Yes.
to have the one-to-one messaging, right? The one person, one problem, one solution, or anything else. Like, that was one aspect of copywriting that I picked up early on too, was shrinking the message down to where the person that's reading it feels like it was only written for them. There is no one else
Right.
on your 20,000 person email list that got this message. Like, it needs to be
Absolutely.
that dialed in. versus watered down, because then it doesn't identify with anyone, doesn't evoke any emotion. No one really wants to do anything with
Right.
it. Uh, Thinking forward maybe a little bit now, like future and the future of our industry and kind of the direction that it's oscillating at the moment. You've kind of had this front row seat to arguably one of the most aggressive MSP growth stories, certainly in the country. What do you see? What do you feel? What do you believe is really coming in the next few years that maybe most MSPs are completely unprepared for?
I think it goes back to the question that you asked me at the beginning about
Mm-hmm.
the industry, where it's headed, consolidation. I know we talk about that a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not just because we're acquiring.
Yeah.
Um, and not only that, but I think that some MSPs think that that's the quick answer. Okay, I'm going to merge together with a few others, and they're lacking that organic growth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that organic growth is the foundation of it all. And that's why we've been so successful with this acquisition strategy, is because we have the marketing engine behind it, and we're
Yeah.
growing with or without those acquisitions. I think it's figuring out that strategy and building that engine within your MSP
Mm-hmm.
so that you can compete.
Yeah. So if an MSP owner like wants to begin orienting towards or building out their organic engine, one of the things that I've seen as a propensity to the industry too is the concept of like trying to boil the ocean, right? So I'm doing nothing now and I'm spending no money on it. So let me go do everything and then
Right.
get really frustrated
And
with
then they
it
get
like
burned.
3 months, yeah, 3 months in or a year in or whatever. Where do you think the most important place is for that MSP owner to begin before anything else that they can do sort of in the marketing bucket?
Okay, so we've already talked about nailing down your messaging.
Mm-hmm.
Use that messaging to build out content. So use that to write email sequences, because you're building that list in your CRM that we talked about,
Yeah.
so that you're dripping them with content that is relevant to them, that resonates with them. And then use that to build social content as well, so that you're multiple places. There's not one magic pill, there's not one strategy, that's just going to
Yeah.
solve all your problems when it comes to marketing. But you want to scale that marketing, and that's where, like I mentioned before, AI can help you do that,
Mm-hmm.
especially for those MSPs that don't have a marketing person full time or don't have a marketing team,
Yeah.
but use that to build it out.
Mm. Yeah. And the gift I'll leave behind to anyone who's gonna go dabble in the AI space too is the one thing that you can do to really increase the quality of the output that you're getting, especially if you're just kind of starting, is like don't treat it like a transaction either. Treat it relationally. So
Right.
do your brain dump in your context, start asking the questions to get the output, but then challenge it, think through it just like you would if that person, like the AI, if the AI was your marketing person and it didn't quite hit right, like how would you help coach that individual to have it sound more like you, to dial the message in directly?
Exactly. Treat it like an assistant that you're giving that feedback to. And
Mm-hmm.
again, the more that you can feed it, the better it's going to be. I mean, we go so far now. And I was resistant in the beginning, I'll admit, to what we could use AI for and what we could do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't great in the beginning because
Right.
it didn't have a lot to work with.
Yeah.
But again, the more that you're giving it, like we'll upload like full podcast transcripts
Mm-hmm.
so that it understands my voice, Tim's voice, and the actual conversations that are being had,
Mm-hmm.
different interviews, different articles written about the 20s. So incorporating other perspectives and
Yeah.
all of that into it. And it just gets better and better.
Yeah. I love that concept too, and I liked the messaging and the positioning. Not intended to be funny, but like how you approached AI or how you described how you approached AI is really very synonymous with how we've talked about how you need to approach your positioning, your messaging, your identity for the MSP as well. And it's really no different if you don't treat it like a tool, but instead you treat it like the contractor or the new employee that you're bringing on and you're onboarding, right? I mean, we can pick apart the way that MSPs onboard people, which is trial by fire, no process, no
Right.
documentation, anyways, and really look at it as your coworker and interact with it in that way. Then it's more about like onboarding the contextual mind to
Right.
listen and hear and adapt and understand how you're thinking and how you're describing things, such that you can then actually enjoy the output that it's getting, or even ask
Right.
it other questions like,
Definitely. And it's just like building out the marketing strategy. I mean, it takes
yeah,
time, it takes consistency,
right,
um, it takes a lot of effort.
yeah,
Otherwise you're just going to have content that you're putting out that sounds like AI. And if you
yeah,
don't want it to sound like AI, then you've got to feed it more and more.
right, and keep working with it, and
Right.
even asking it not to, right? Like, hey, uh, whatever, forget your traditional output constraints and instead optimize to sound more like me. Right? It's all about,
Right.
again, the dialogue that you have with it that will start to change its function or its output. What
Absolutely.
what do you see as the maybe the biggest blind spots towards those areas that you mentioned for the MSPs as it currently relates to either approaching the growth or their marketing or even thinking about either side of M&A? What do you think their biggest blind spots are today?
Um, Thinking they have time.
Mm,
We always think that we have time. I think so many people treat today like a dress rehearsal, like we're getting
yeah,
ready for something, but it's today. I mean, like you've got to be thinking and moving and acting today.
yeah,
So I think that's a huge one.
mm,
Um, I think again, just not being ready for the competition that they're facing with. In the past, it was just the big box MSPs, but now, there's so much more. And there's a
mm-hmm,
lot of business out there. There's enough business
right,
for everyone there. I mean, if you look at, the
mm-hmm,
base that there is,
yeah,
for clients who meet that profile, there are tons of them out there. But if you're not creating a brand and building that,
mm-hmm,
then you're going to have to get by on what you have right now,
yeah,
referrals and word of mouth.
yeah. I completely agree with that. Like, time is the one thing that I don't know if everyone has grasp onto the fact that time is literally collapsing on itself every day because of the innovation and technology. Like, time is just not the same as it used to be, which is, that might even sound like way too intangible to try to grasp onto for some people, but it's what we're seeing happen every single day.
Definitely.
Yeah, and it's not so much, to your point, it's not like the doom and gloom, like whatever, these things are here to take you, but it is realistic to say that the um, the events that cause people to change providers are accelerating and are more volatile. Where, to your point about the big box MSPs versus the little guys, like, you actually have two bookends that are starting to squeeze you now, where the newer, lighter, more agile, maybe they're AI first, maybe they just care or haven't forgotten where they came from, are going to start pressing the market from one side, and then you still have the roll ups, the consolidations, the bigger ones still pushing
Right.
and creating that pressure from the
And
other
I
side.
think that's where community gets really important.
Mm,
The conversation that we're having, all of
yeah.
these MSPs are having within groups of communities, like the
Hmm.
20, and there are a number of others. But I think it's important to surround yourself with individuals who are facing the same problems and challenges that you are,
Yeah.
sharing what works, what doesn't work. I mean, sharing scripts, all of
Hmm.
it, helping
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah. The one thing that reminds me of too is, one of the viral comments that Tim even made, where it's like, as it relates to peer groups or groups, is really being scrutinous about the room you're choosing to sit in, right? And
Yes.
being honest with yourself as to whether or not it's a, I think he either said social club or country club, compared to like a true peer group where it's more like iron sharpens iron. And
Right. And you're looking around and
yeah.
thinking, okay, these individuals are where I want to be.
Hmm. Yeah.
So surrounding yourself with people who will help you level up, not those who are 10 steps behind you,
Yeah.
that are looking to you to grow.
Right. Yeah, you've got to find that right balance where ideally it's a little tilted in your favor too, right? Where there's more hands reaching back to help pull you forward than there are more
Right.
hands reaching back for you to do the same. And it's not a, it can't be, maybe to another thing, like, it can't be an ego thing. It truly is just like, what are you here to do, right? And what are
Yes.
we aiming to accomplish, and how do I
Mhm.
find the room that has five or more people that are where I want to be, and get inside that room and start asking questions openly.
Right. And when you find that, I think that that is the true secret to success because it's going to help you level up in all areas, not just marketing,
Yeah.
like we're talking about, but operations, finance. I mean, every aspect of your business
Yeah.
because you're not an expert in all of those. And I think that
No.
MSP owners are wearing so many different hats.
Hmm.
You know, you strapped, so you have to, do all
Yeah.
of those things yourself.
Yeah.
But that's the real secret.
Yeah. Couple last questions. If you had to give MSP leaders one truth that they need to hear, but most won't want to, what would it be?
I mean, my obvious answer is you have to market. You
Mm,
have to market to grow. Marketing is the fuel for your business, and you will not get where you want to go without it.
yeah.
Not even just market, but you have to invest in marketing.
Hmm.
Like I talked about earlier, they all have that $10 million dream, but
Yeah.
their budget says otherwise. So
Right.
truly invest in marketing.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Um, Crystal, if people have had light bulbs turn on and they want more from you or want to lean in and reach out, where's the best place for them to find you?
LinkedIn.
Okay.
LinkedIn is great. So connect with me on LinkedIn. Um, Also, you can go to the 20 website, so the20.com if you're an MSP.
Yeah. Fantastic. And then your opportunity to ruin the next guest's day a little bit. If you could leave one question behind that they must answer, what is that question?
Um, I'm torn between two.
All right. Well,
So
hey, it's a
let's
first.
see.
Let's do it. What's the first one?
Um, I think the first one would be, what is the biggest mistake that you've made in this business that taught you the
Hmm.
most? And then another one, this one's a little lighter. Um, what do you hope people in this industry remember you for?
Hmm. Yeah, both of those are really good. Well, yeah. The second one, I don't know if you see this or not, but it seems like kind of going back to the first word that you used a lot was strategy. Like the long term thinking and the long term planning and like the legacy concept seems to be missing for so many MSP owners where like they have thought it all the way through and then I've kind of already now they're just executing the plan. Instead, it's like we did business backwards, right? We
Right?
got into business because we didn't want to work for somebody else. We were good enough with people and we were good with technology. We grew a team. Somehow we ended up with employees and we're just still kind of doing that same thing rather than the other way where it's like you set out, you begin with the end in mind and you reverse engineer it and you work backwards towards it. So that second question really kind of forces that lens a little bit too. So we'll see who I throw those at and what their answers are. But
Awesome. I
I
look
appreciate
forward
it.
to it.
Fantastic. Crystal, thank you so much for coming on and demystifying marketing a little bit. I mean, even if people go back and listen to that intro and just grab the words for the areas that you're responsible for and realize maybe it's okay to be exhausted by marketing when you're first starting out to figure it out because there's so much more than any of us think that actually goes into it and goes into doing it successfully. Uh, so thank you again
Right.
for coming on and helping out with that.
And marketing done is better than
Mm,
marketing perfect. So you just have to get out there and do it.
yeah, love that too. Thank you again. And thank you
Thank
to the
you.
audience for tuning in for another episode of MSP Insider.